Hi viewers, what's up? So here's another video, very different. I usually sit in my couch and I like to discuss books, but this time I wanted to do something a little bit different, starting maybe a little bit of a series called Books in Bed. So if you've never watched any of my videos before, my name is Derek. I love talking books. I like to write. I like to do things. And today is something completely different, something exciting, and yeah, I'm just excited to get to it. So, Books in Bed, episode 1. So, first things first, I decided it would be a really good idea just to share the last few books that I've read. And so I'm going to start with Jeremy Bates' Helltown. This book I found like really random on Amazon, and I'm like, oh, this sounds really good, and finding out it was book 3, I'm like, I don't know if I want to read it, and then finding out that this World's Scariest Places series is kind of standalone novels. They don't really build on one another. It's just horror fiction based off real scary places. So Jeremy Bates' Helltown, I finished this I think in about a week. And it's based in Summit County, Ohio. And I'll just read from the back cover here. No one leaves alive. I think this is a good time to hide underneath my blanket and just, yeah. Oh, it's nice and warm. Just kidding. Alright, so, back cover. No one leaves alive. Since the 1980s, there have been numerous reports of occult activity and other possibly supernatural phenomenon within certain villages and townships of Summit County, Ohio, an area collectively known as Helltown. When a group of out-of-town friends investigating the legends are driven off the road by a mysterious hearse, their night of cheap thrills turns to chills as they begin to die, one by one. So this novel, it's a really good story. On Goodreads, I gave it a 4 out of 5 because, without giving away a little bit too much, basically there's a Satanist thing going on in this novel. And of course, because you're discussing Satanism, you should probably bring up Anton LaVey. And he does pop up a couple times in the book. And I'm like, seriously? Really? Can we do something a little bit more original here? But no, we decided to throw Anton LaVey as a character that has influenced the life of a character, and that's why he does what he does. So I'm like, I don't know how much I like this. It seems like, and I haven't read a whole lot of like cultish / Satanist horror. It's just not something I'm used to reading. But if that's going to be a trope in every horror novel that talks about Satanism, I don't know if I want to get into that. So yeah, this was for a while my first foray into contemporary horror, and it just made me realize why I love horror to begin with. Number one, I just absolutely like the thrill that you get watching a horror movie. And reading a horror novel, you get that same thrill, but it's a lot more spookier because you kind of see things like happening in your mind. It's just an experience, and I just loved it. So I read this about a couple weeks ago, and this is too funny too, because ironically this is set in the 1980s, and on social media I talk about how I love American Horror Story. And last season, 1984. This book takes place in 1984. So that's probably why I really enjoyed this book too, because it was kind of like, oh, this happened in the 80s, and what would happen if these two worlds collided? And they kind of did something like that with Season 8, Apocalypse. Yeah. Alright, so 4 out of 5 for Jeremy Bates' Helltown. The book I read after that is a non-fiction work, Heather McDaniel's A Diversity Delusion. How race and gender pandering corrupt the university and undermine our culture. And I mentioned this before on Facebook and I think maybe Twitter. I can't remember all where I discussed it. But I talk about reading things that you don't normally read, and read things that are challenging because you may not agree with the author and their stance on things. And I talked a little bit about that when I read Ben Shapiro's Bullies. And after reading that, I found I really liked social commentary, especially conservative social commentary. No reason for it. I would like to read some more like liberal nonfiction, and I think I have at least one book in my TBR shelf. I can't remember right now, and I'm too lazy to get out of bed and look. But yeah, it's just exposing myself to political commentary, social commentary, just kind of spice up my reading life, you know. And diversity delusion definitely was something that I found really interesting. I found the book scrolling through Amazon, which I should stop doing because my bookshelf keeps growing because I can't get off Amazon. So yeah, again, really enjoyed this book. Didn't particularly agree with a whole lot of things. It seems to me that the author, while she tries to be as factually correct as she possibly can, in a way when she's writing it down and synthesizing information, it just seems like there's this element of fear, like, this is gonna something bad's gonna happen if we, you know, keep doing what we're doing. And it's like, Heather, girl, Heather, come on, girl, calm down, girl, you know. But regardless, this book was really good, especially since I do have a degree in educational leadership at the college level. I thought this would be a good book just to get myself exposed back to what I learned before. And for the most part, it did its job in teaching me a little bit more and understanding, and kind of like going with like the fact that I read a horror fiction and then switching into nonfiction. This is something that I do all the time, and I want to talk about it in another video where I discuss my reading habits. One of the things I love doing, I like to switch back and forth between fiction and nonfiction, fiction and nonfiction. And even with the fiction, I will find myself reading contemporary fiction, and then I'll read a classical piece of literature, going back into contemporary fiction, then going into classical. So it's a habit that I like to do, you know, to spice things up, you know. If I had a, you know, pepper shaker, I would totally hold it right now, but, you know, your boy forgot to, you know, take one down from the kitchen. So yeah. So speaking of which, I also started to reread A Christmas Carol. This was a story that I remember reading way back when I was a youngin', probably about like 9 or 10 or sometime in elementary school. And I just remember, because it was my first intro to Mr. Dickens, is I liked his writing style, and I liked how he wrote, how he really cared about detail, and the, what's the word I'm looking for, but he's just really like meticulous with his characters. And it's just something that about the way that he writes is what brought me into classical lit. And A Christmas Carol, I've loved this story for such a long time, and I'll think about it, like how much I like it and how much I enjoy the movie adaptations. And it got me thinking, like, if I were to reread a book, it would be this. It would be every December, and that's something I'm doing now. What I really like about this edition of A Christmas Carol is that you get these beautiful flashbacks in history, and I think you can see it a little bit here. You actually have the manuscript that Dickens had penned in his own hand, and it has his edits and it has his additions. It's just a beautiful picture of history, in my opinion. This is why I wanted this particular edition of A Christmas Carol, because not only do I love this story, I also love the impact that it had on, you know, our world, and how we celebrate Christmas. It has a lot to do with Mr. Dickens and his story of Ebenezer Scrooge and his bah humbug and the three ghosts, and he's like, I love Christmas at the end. Yeah, so Christmas Carol, love it. I read a little bit of it a few hours ago, so I'm now on chapter 3, or stave 3, as Mr. Dickens likes to call it. So we're kind of now moving from the Ghost of Christmas Past, moving into Christmas Present. So that's A Christmas Carol. And along with reading A Christmas Carol, I just literally finished reading Hermann Hesse's Siddhartha. And I am so glad that I bought this book. I can't remember when, but I'm glad I bought it, because it reminds me why I have my faith. And I'm not a Buddhist. Hermann Hesse, this story is about Buddhism. It's about a man named Siddhartha. He's on a spiritual journey. And that's why I like this story, because it was that spiritual journey aspect of it. And midpoint, I don't want to reveal too much, but he realizes that the things of the world can chain you down, and you can become blinded. And that's what really, that was the point where this story really hooked me, is that idea that he paints, that the things of the world can latch on to you, and you can forget who you really are. Not going to reveal the end of the book, but I did want to read a little bit out of it that really spoke to me today. And basically what's happening is our main dude, our Siddhartha dude, he's speaking to Govinda. And he replies to Govinda and he says, "I am not joking. I am telling you what I have found. One can convey knowledge, but not wisdom. One can find wisdom. One can live it. One can be born by it. One can work wonders with it. But one can neither speak it nor teach it. This is what at times I surmised even in my youth, what drove me away from my teachers. I have discovered a thought, Govinda, which again you will take as a joke or as folly, but which is my finest. The opposite of every truth is equally true. To wit, a truth always only allows itself to be expressed and wrapped in words when it is unilateral. Everything that can be thought with thoughts and said with words is unilateral. Everything one-sided, a moiety. Everything lacks wholeness, roundness, unity." I'll just stop there because, yeah. Picked this book up, kind of in the middle of finishing it. I'm thinking I'd recommend anyone read this book. Anyone, everyone should read Siddhartha. What am I going to read after this? A while back, a friend told me about a book that he had written called Organized Chaos. And so I'm like, I want to read this. I'll support you as a independent writer. So I decided finally to read this, and I got this like mid-2018, I think it was. No, it was it was middle of this year that my friend Cass Swenson gave me the copy of a book that he had written. So with that, that's pretty much books that I have read and will read and all that jazz. Next thing I really wanted to briefly touch upon is a book that I'm writing. I'm just now finishing up that world building aspect of it. I have one more story that I'm penning. Basically, in the story that I have planned is this fraudulent psychic takes up residence in our house of mystery and horror. And he gets assaulted, and all of a sudden he's no longer a fraudulent psychic, but a genuine psychic. And basically what this is kind of getting into, like, and I realized this, like, maybe like halfway in the first couple of chapters that I had written, is I'm writing all the different ways that people can be exposed to demons and ghosts, like all that stuff. And with his situation, he's a chaotic medium. Our main character, because there's a few of them, is more of a lightning rod. In other words, things come to him. And then you have familial mediums. In other words, spirits and demons can torment a family for generations. And so I'm kind of exploring all the different aspects that humans can be mediums. And it's an interesting exploration, if you will. And so, as soon as I'm done with that fraudulent psychic turned genuine, I'm actually going to get into the actual, like, novel part of it. So it's kind of like you're interweaving short story into a huge story. Never done it before, but I've read it. Melmoth kind of inspired me a little bit, but it's obviously not the same. So yeah, this was Books in Bed with your boy Derek. If you liked this video, if you want to see more of this kind of video, hit the like button so I know. Go ahead and hit subscribe. And comment on what you are thinking about reading in the next year, because I would like to know what you're reading. Thank you so much for tuning in, and you have a great, super wonderful rest of your day. Bye.